Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce our next panel. Actually, Szilárd said at the beginning that that panel would be the feel-good panel. So, well, this is going to be the feel-bad panel, I suppose. It will be about when politicians lie, how to fight state-sponsored disinformation. Let me introduce you our distinguished speakers. Firstly, Tamar Kintsurashvili from Georgia. She has been heading a Georgian fact-checking website, Detector, for almost 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. Szilárd Teczár from Hungary, from our fact-checking website, Lakmusz.hu, the editor-in-chief, and Felix Kartte, who is now a senior fellow with the Mercator Stiftung. He's coming from Germany, but he has been researching disinformation for a very long time, also disinformation in the US and in Russia. So let's begin the fun. So we have seen actually the other side, all the, sorry, and I'm Blanka Zöldi from Lakmusz as well, fact-checking website. So we have seen some prime examples in the previous panel of how fact-based journalism can reach a really wide audience. And in this panel, we are going to take ourselves to the other side, actually, because we have to see that while really prestigious fact-based journalism can work, in real life, we are facing also another threat, which is government propaganda, official disinformation spread in a very structured way in many, many countries. We see examples from Georgia, Hungary, and Felix, I think I will ask you about Germany, US, Russia, whichever you feel comfortable with talking about. First, with a very quick intro round, I would like to ask you, what do you consider as the most worrying tendencies in your respective countries in terms of state-sponsored disinformation over the past years?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Like our governments, we have a lot of things to share. And I will start with disinformation pattern because Georgia is a case where domestic and foreign actors are instrumental when we are talking about information manipulation and interference. And sometimes I'm joking that our government does a job that Russia has nothing to do. And situation became more dramatic after Russia's invasion, full-scale invasion in Ukraine. Before government was trying to play double game to simulate that they are integrating into the West. But the methods they were using was complicated even before because externally they were talking about Russia as a security threat for the country, while internally we are avoiding to mention Russia as a threat because part of Georgia is occupied and we still have presence of Russian military troop on the ground. And pro-Kremlin actors were always trying to shift focus from Russia's responsibility to other sides, for instance, saying that our neighboring Turkey is occupied like the Russia is, referring to historic occupation which happened a century ago. And the goal in this method is to shift focus and blame everybody besides Russia. Later, when government started manipulation with this global world party conspiracies, they initiated these war-related narratives, accusing our Western partners that they are forcing Georgia to open second front here. And that's why any criticism coming from Brussels related to justice reform or other issues, we are justified that this criticism is because we are not the country like Ukraine who are engaging in the war. And second, and I will end here, there are three main topics: war-related, religion and identity-based discourse, and sovereign democracy developed back in Russia by Surkov, saying that Russia is democracy, you should accept this fact, and if you are questioning democracy in Russia, you are interfering in domestic issues. And now, response to the criticism on internal domestic problems are the main challenge, because they are saying that we should defend our sovereign democracy. And even before elections, they use EU symbols, and their slogan of government was to the EU with peace, dignity, and prosperity. Under dignity, they mean sovereign democracy. And sovereign democracy means violation of human rights, attacks on protesters, imposing sanctions, and adoption of foreign agent law. And we will talk about this later.
Yeah, thank you, Blanka, and good afternoon to all of you. It's good to see so many of you. Indeed, in Hungary, we see it in our day-to-day work as fact-checkers that different entities controlled by the government party are very important, or maybe one could argue that the main spreaders of disinformation in Hungary. Before the European elections last year, we conducted an election ad monitoring project together with our partners, Mertek and Political Capital. So within that time frame, we could even quantify their importance, and it turned out that in terms of overall money spent on ads, in terms of the money spent on ads containing so-called hostile narratives, and also in terms of ads containing actual pieces of disinformation, the government and its proxies were the biggest spenders by far. And by proxies, here I mean media organizations controlled by the government, network of influencers controlled by the government, and so-called government-organized non-governmental organizations, if you are familiar with that funny term, gongos, yes, indeed. So they were the main spreaders of hostile narratives and disinformation. I think above 90% we could say at the end of our project. In terms of the topics, I think the main trend and maybe the most worrying thing we see is a very neat fitting together of anti-West disinformation and pro-Russian disinformation. So it's like a perfect meeting, and every topic can be framed according to this narrative. So be it migration, LGBTQ issues, even climate change. Maybe they won't deny the existence of climate change outright, but they will question the mitigation measures and the importance of the climate crisis. So I think there is a kind of, we can almost call it a meta narrative, and a very so this information from various topics can be somehow woven into it. And what is in the EU, I think a very peculiar thing about Hungary and disinformation in Hungary, that I have the impression that EU institutions are not really prepared to face these kinds of issues, because they mainly conceive disinformation as something coming from outside the EU. So there is even the term foreign information manipulation and interference. And we don't even have the right vocabulary to deal with disinformation when it's originating from a member state government. And maybe we can discuss it during the next question. But I think it's maybe equally worrying as the trends themselves.
Well, thanks also from my side for inviting me to Budapest. It's my first time here. I wouldn't say we have state-sponsored disinformation in Germany yet, even though J.D. Vance or Elon Musk claim the opposite. They basically say that the mere existence of a queer person is an act of propaganda, basically. So, yeah, you could say it's a matter of interpretation, of course. At this time, I think what I find most worrying is how in countries like Germany we're still affected by state-sponsored disinformation. I remember when I started working at the External Action Service in Brussels about 8 years ago, disinformation was really something that we had to look for. Like, we needed to hire all of these forensic analysts to go through social media and find small pieces of evidence that might indicate Russian influence. And now fast forward 8 years, you only have to switch on your TV or open TikTok and you will be confronted with Kremlin state propaganda, peddled, including, of course, by the US president when he says that Zelensky in Ukraine is a dictator or that Ukraine is to blame for the war. So I think we're now shifting really from this previous era of disinformation as a fringe problem to an era of broadcast propaganda, and we've had that in Germany before, and it didn't end well, so I find that quite worrying.
Coming back to actually the EU's preparedness, because you have mentioned that you have worked quite extensively also in Brussels with the External Action Service and with the Commission as well. Do you see any change in this regard? Because I think this is something that we have been saying in Hungary ever since that we have started our fact-checking website. Your words resonate very well. That at international conferences, when we were asked, like, okay, how do you search for this information in Telegram channels or fringe Facebook groups? It's just like, look at the main stage of politics. Yeah. Do you see any change in this regard within the European Union?
Well, the EU, of course, has stepped up a lot over the past years. We have had this code of practice against disinformation. In the beginning, mostly voluntary measures. When we still believed that we could rely on goodwill with the platforms, I think that ship has sailed a little bit at last, since they sided with the Trump administration a few months ago. I think that illusion, that bubble kind of burst, that we could rely on goodwill with the platforms. But we have the code of practice against disinformation. We have the DSA, of course, as a regulatory tool to force the platforms to be much more transparent about how they deal with state actor propaganda as well, and with different types of manipulation. I always think that had we had these tools 5 years ago, they might have been really effective. But I think, unfortunately, like, the institutional framework that we have, as is often the case, wasn't fast enough to keep up with technology, and also the bad will and the resources of Russia and other authoritarian actors, including, of course, here in Hungary. So there are tools. Will they save us? I don't think so. Should regulation alone save us? I also don't think so. I'm glad that we still have free media, journalism, hopefully also civic initiatives in the years to come. But I don't think, as you said, it's necessarily the brightest outlook right now, unfortunately.
Okay, then let's talk still about the not so bright outlook. Szilárd has already mentioned what we have seen in Hungary with regards to the role of social media platforms helping to spread disinformation on a systemic scale. I would be interested how this works in other countries, in your view. Have social media platforms really tried to stop the spread of disinformation, as they had been claiming for many years, or have you seen any instances, for example, in Georgia, where they actually let free flow of disinformation on the platforms?
Actually, coming back to EU and DSA, I think the EU is now only institution that can help fact checkers and others to ensure compliance of platforms with the Code of Conduct and DSA. And the most successful program, and it's still in EU and other countries, is a third-party fact-checking program and content moderation through third-party fact-checkers. So, but after Trump's second round, we saw that Zuckerberg's announcement that fact-checkers are censors, and they are now reviewing the model and trying to switch to community nodes, which is especially dangerous in authoritarian country where governments can mobilize thousands of supporters or use their administrative resources like they are using now for trolling on social media. So, and in terms of financial sustainability, it's also important. Now you can play a crucial role, at least to support this DSA in EU countries. And I think we had quite good cooperation with Meta, not only on disinformation, but on research of CIB or coordinated inauthentic behavior, because autocratic countries are using social platforms against democracy, mobilizing their supporters and fake accounts, and troll factory model is active in Georgia and I assume in many other authoritarian countries. Without having access to data, we are not able to investigate and have the full picture of disinformation actors. Fact-checking is about the false news, but we have different methods operated, and they are acting in centralized way. Of course, it's difficult to find the false news in Sputnik, which is officially sponsored. They are more propagating and they are trying to observe certain standards. But they have fringe media outlets or media outlets mimicking the Western platforms. We know very good investigation with doppelgangers. And like our government, it's not only obvious that they have affiliation with Kremlin, but they are spreading similar narratives and fake news. And our government positions itself as a conservative country, and they developed conservative platform, translating Western influencers or journalists, Tucker Carlson, and making the role model from Orban, etc. It's difficult to detect because it's presented as a EU and West, but they are speculating on division in the Western society, saying that EU is divided. We should integrate in conservative traditional EU rather than pervert one. So.
How do you see the change in the U.S. politics and the change of Zuckerberg's statements in light of work of fact checkers and the whole anti-disinformation community?
Yeah, I agree actually with Felix that the EU approach initially counted on the goodwill and cooperation of platforms. I think that can be seen from the wording of the DSA itself and the fact that a voluntary code of conduct was attached to it. And to a certain extent, that belief already collapsed when Musk took over X, because it was quite obvious from the start that he doesn't want to cooperate. He, in fact, wants to provoke the EU and test the limits of this new legal instrument. And after the Trump we could see the announcement, actually a very hostile announcement from Zuckerberg, and then a much more low-profile turning away from commitments by Google as well, at the point when the code of practice was turned into a code of conduct, which has real legal relevance under the DSA. So for me, now we are at a point where very much depends on how the Commission will enforce the DSA, because the wording of the law is quite far from clear. So I think a very interesting and often overlooked thing about the Digital Services Act, that people usually talk about it as an anti-disinformation law, while in reality, if you open the text of the law and type disinformation into the search, you will realize that it features exactly 0 times in the main body of the text. It appears a few times in the introduction, but the real legally enforceable provisions, nothing. The only relevant provision is Article 35, if I'm not mistaken, which says that platforms, very large online platforms, has to do effective risk mitigation in relation to public discourse and elections. And yes, we can agree that anti-disinformation measures are part of it, but the DSA never says that, for example, platforms have to do third-party fact-checking, or that they cannot do community notes. The only thing in the law is it has to be effective, and it will depend on the Commission, and I think ultimately on the European Court of Justice, what is effective and what is not. And obviously, because there is so much unclarity in the law itself, the Commission has a very broad room for maneuver now. And I think we can safely say that maybe political considerations can come into the game in relation with the trade war with the US. So this whole legal framework is a very open question now. Maybe one final point. I think an interesting test case will be the investigation that the Commission opened against TikTok concerning its role in the Romanian presidential election. Because we all know that the Romanian Constitutional Court annulled the election result because of things going on TikTok. So now the Commission is in a kind of awkward position, because if in the end of the investigation it says that TikTok did not breach its obligation to risk mitigate, then we can ask the question, okay, if it's not a breach of obligation when a national court has to annul an election because of things going on one platform, then what is? So I think it will be very interesting and maybe a kind of benchmark or at least important precedent how the Commission or maybe the court will handle this case.
Still on fact checkers? Yes? Okay. Firstly, I remember, I think it was 2018 when I was working for the EU, we started these talks with the platforms about this code of practice and the measures they wanted to take. And they were already doing fact-checking then. I mean, it was never the EU who told them to do fact-checking. That is just the framing that the MAGA Americans used now to frame the EU as like a censorship complex because they don't want EU regulation for their companies. And that's basically it, I think. That is one thing to important to keep in mind. The other thing is that why these constant attacks on fact checkers? I think it's more broadly an attack on science and on journalism. The idea that facts are disputable or a matter of perspective, of course, because this is a way for autocratic regimes, for authoritarians to avoid accountability, because if there are no more facts, nobody can hold them accountable. Nobody can call their bluffs and call them out for their abuses of power and their misconduct. So I think the agenda is much broader than fact-checking, even though fact-checkers are unfortunately now in the line of fire, because yeah, they're so easily politicized in a way for people who maybe haven't really thought these issues through. I really hope that the Commission is not going to be too apologetic about it. That is something that I'm witnessing a bit at the moment, and that I hope is not going to become a trend. They should not at all be apologetic vis-à-vis the US about our regulatory framework.
We have covered now quite extensively what is the responsibility of platforms helping to spread disinformation, what European regulations can do against it. Now I would briefly, so maybe we will have questions from the audience at the end as well. I would like to ask you about some special tactics that are being used in different countries by authoritarian-leaning government, because, well, we do have quite some of those experiences felt on our skin as well, from the launching of fake fact-checking websites that don't really follow the professional or ethical guidelines of fact-checking, or simply labeling organizations as foreign agents, or introducing laws to not only discredit the work of anti-disinformation experts, but basically making it impossible in several countries. So just to frame it a little bit, happier, what is your favorite, most creative way of authoritarian-leaning governments as tactics to discredit or make impossible anti-disinformation work? Just some ideas, and maybe you can also. I would love you to share some examples how this could be actually fought against in some cases. What is the efficient way?
Well, the most creative tactic I have seen recently is for authoritarian governments to buy online platforms and use them globally to promote extremism and pro-Russian disinformation, for instance. Yeah. And Russia is doing it too, by the way, with RootTube and all of these like copycat platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Hungary, we have quite recently seen the launch of two government-controlled fact-checking website, which is a nice tactic, considering the fact that for 3 years, since Lakmusz started, they said that fact-checking is an evil thing, censorship, coming from the left-wing Brussels globalist elite, and now they are at least on the surface applying this method. Sometimes they even write counter fact checks on our fact checks, of course using a very peculiar definition of facts. So yeah, what is a good way to fight? Yeah, Blanka, you know that we are still debating whether we should respond to this. What is the right way to communicate? At the moment, I feel that maybe it's best not to get dragged into this us versus them fight, because it would maybe only reinforce this perception, which is unfortunately already quite widespread, as Peter mentioned in the introductory speech in the Hungarian public, that facts are not real, and every political side has its own facts. So I feel that our articles should speak for themselves, but I can imagine that a point will come where this this thing will become too large to ignore, but I don't think it's there yet.
Tamar, in many cases, actually, we are, as you mentioned at the very beginning, we are looking at Georgia as a frightening example, or some might be looking at it as an example to learn from. Your foreign agent law is carrying a lot of similarities to the sovereignty protection law that Hungary has passed. Both carrying similarities to Russia's foreign agent law. I would be very interested to hear your experience, how this has impacted your daily work at Detector, and please give us some ideas how you can go against these measures.
Actually, this is critical momentum when we have no ideas how to act. Because when first law on foreign agent, we called it Russian-style law, was introduced, most NGOs refused to register, and we registered in Estonia to have some financial safeguards and backing. And then government responded, they translated the American FARA from 1938, if I'm not wrong, literally, word by word. And they are planning to apply this legislation against domestic actors and individuals, because now it's even dangerous to have salary from Estonia, because all staff receiving money should register as foreign agents. Otherwise, they will be arrested. So we decided now to move this stuff to Georgian NGO and take our own responsibility. It's better to be arrested alone rather than have 30 employees called foreign agent, because it's unacceptable. We don't know what will happen because it's very critical momentum right now, and this is not only law. The package of whole legislation, they return this treason law, the criminalizing the traitors. So they already announced us as a traitors before adoption of this law, putting our pictures on our, vandalizing our offices, saying that we are pseudo-liberal fascists and there is no place for us in this country. So it's difficult to predict how they will reinforce this legislation. They failed to enforce previous one because most NGOs refused and people are still protesting in the streets, but situation becomes, now there is the Megobrova Act, this is Friendship Act, discussed in US Congress, imposing sanctions on Ivanishvili, but they are preparing for isolations. Recently, they even talk about having our own MasterCards like Russia did. So this means full isolation from the West, closer relationship with China. It's not very clear for us what will be next steps. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe before the coffee break, we might have 5 minutes for questions, if anybody wants from the audience. Yes? I'm not sure if you have to... Yeah, I think it's fine.
Okay, so hi, Martin, I'm a journalist as well. I think with regards to, thank you. I think, thank you. In state disinformation, we have seen already the widespread use of so-called troll factories or bot armies. And my very cheerful question is, now that we see new AI tools surging like mushrooms, have we also already started to see these new AI tools being employed sort of eagerly or expertly by government propaganda, and whether you guys already have some ideas about how to fight this new sort of AI disinformation?
There was a recent analysis done by NewsGuard, which actually analyzed these Western chatbots and how they respond to questions or prompts that contain elements of Russian disinformation narratives. And what they found is that in a quite large many times they repeated these narratives, and we also know from internal documents that the Russian social design agency that was behind the doppelganger articles deliberately put out a lot of content in order to infect the large language models of chatbots and spread their narratives in that way. So this is a thing. In Hungary, we had some funny cases where, for example, government-controlled newspapers asked a question from ChatGPT, like, is this opposition politician mentally ill? And when it answered yes, they published it as a proof. And so, but yeah, I think the more worrying is the general trend of Russian disinformation spreading.
And we detected number of cases, mostly visual manipulation, and we cover also Russia besides Georgia. And they use AI-generated images for gender disinformation to present women politicians as prostitutes in their past lives. And they also used, during elections, the voice generated by AI to call OSCE spokesperson and threaten her on behalf of opposition. So, and we did investigation with the support of our colleagues through IFC network, and these networks work quite well to do this type of quite complicated investigations together.
And since I am to talk about the US government, I saw, I think the use of AI comes a bit with a trivialization or also almost like a kind of entertainment framing to propaganda. I saw that the White House used this recent, I don't know what it was called, but this AI trend where everybody was regenerating their profile pictures with this, what was it called? It was everywhere on social media for the past days.
Is that the Ghibli thing? The Studio Ghibli thing?
And they were using it to generate this really derogatory image of an apparent Latin woman who was being detained and deported, so kind of making that funny. Or they used, I saw on the White House's social media, on the Instagram account, they AI generated this video that was kind of turning into a cartoon, this idea that Trump would ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip and turn it into like a holiday paradise. And yeah, so that was also AI generated. It really comes with a banalization almost of the most horrifying ideologies.
Thank you. Yes?
Thank you. I'm András Pinterda from the Hungarian Skeptic Society. My question is concerning the lack of success overall, in general, of conveying the message and making everyone aware that there is a truth that can be found through fact-checking, because facts do matter. To what extent is this a funding issue? So, with more funding, that would allow for more workforce to be put against this task of fact-checking and making the facts known to the general public. to what extent is just a funding issue that obviously governments who do have access to a lot of money that could be put against it have a clear advantage. So can funding be found in a way that it could be extended, this whole work that is necessary for facts to get out there? Is it possible?
I will answer because I have worked with funders before. Firstly, I think the trend right now is unfortunately more the opposite, that funding is cut everywhere, mostly in the US, of course, with USA breaking away, but also other European governments becoming more hesitant. I think that is very unfortunate, and I hope that the EU will address this perhaps through the next multi-annual financial framework, the next EU budget negotiations, to include dedicated funding for civil society, especially if tools like the DSA are built on civil society participation and support. Of course, there should be public funding for it as well. But yeah, it's going to be a lift. I think there needs to be advocacy around this issue. As a thought, I will add that I'm not always sure that facts is really what people are after so much, or that I'm not always sure that truth can actually save us. I think there are other underlying existential emotional needs in these audiences particularly vulnerable to authoritarian narratives like young men, for instance, that we cannot cater to with facts, but there needs to be also a new style of communication.
If I may add, actually we should not discuss fact-checking in isolation, because telling someone that you are lying is not a good method to change his mind. But we should consider it as a part of bigger resilience building approach and with media literacy, because we are generating content that is useful to teach people on concrete case study what methods they are using and to explain why this content is problematic, and to try to give them understanding how to consume media wisely. This takes more time rather than immediate response on particular fact-checking, but through Meta's program, we at least are reducing distribution of this content. That's why this cooperation is important, and they are trying to change their methods, because now they are not always lying. Sometimes content produced by harmful actors is difficult to debunk, because facts are true, they are combining private live pictures of gay politicians with their real quotes, and you are not able to verify their personal life or to deal with this type of content. So it's not only an issue of funding, this was what I wanted to add.
Yeah, I think more funding would definitely help, but I do not think it's only a funding issue, and I do not think that it's only a fact-checking issue. So, for example, in Hungary, the whole independent media landscape should be strengthened, and obviously education and media literacy should be strengthened as well. And maybe if we agree that social media platforms are a part of a problem or making this problem worse, maybe instead of trying always to regulate them, we could make them to contribute to those very important fields as independent media and media literacy education, like through some kind of independent funding mechanism, and in that way we wouldn't have this fake censorship attack so much thrown at us, because it would be like a more indirect approach.
Tamar, Szilárd, Felix, thank you so much for being with us and for your insightful thoughts. And I would suggest that if you have any more questions, we take this to the coffee break. It will be 10 minutes long, and we will come back with a very interesting research panel. So drink your coffee quickly. Thank you.